Hello, welcome back for another episode of HunterTuned. Today I am going to be working on my B20 bottom end. We are going to start by polishing my crankshaft. Now this is the crankshaft that came out of the B20 motor that I just picked up, and I got that over here all honed up and ready to go. I did that off camera last night. I got the cylinders honed and the block kind of painted up with some, just some aluminum color paint. And yeah, so we're gonna get started on this thing, and I'm gonna kind of show you guys how to polish your crankshaft at home. Now machine shops usually do this for a pretty reasonable rate. I would say probably like 25 bucks or something like that. It's really not too expensive to get it done, but I just figured I would show you guys that you can do it at home for like $1 or $2. It really doesn't take anything to do it. There's just a few things you need to buy or have laying around, and we're just going to have some sandpaper here. This is 600 grit sandpaper. Normally when I do this, I do like 500, 1,000, and then 1,500. I just am going to skip the 1,000 step, and we are going to go 600 to 1,500 just to kind of demonstrate. So what you want to do is you want to actually just have a shoestring and some sandpaper. This is 600 grit sandpaper, like I said, and what you want to do is you want to cut the sandpaper the width of the journal so it fits around the crank journal, just like so. And that'll fit right around the journal like that. And then you're going to wrap your shoestring around the sandpaper and kind of just work it back and forth. So I'm going to kind of demonstrate that quick and kind of show you how to get one of these journals cleaned up. Now, it is a good idea when you're doing this to have oil on the crankshaft. You can do it dry, it's really not going to hurt anything, but I'm just using the oil residue that was in the motor that is still kind of left onto the crankshaft to kind of polish it up. So I'm going to do that. If you don't have any like oil on the crank and it's like completely clean, I recommend to use like automatic transmission fluid or something like that to kind of use as a fluid dampening or fluid just to kind of ease the sandpaper onto the metal kind of thing. But yeah, so I'm going to show you guys how to polish your crank quick, and we'll, just follow along. Alright, so like I said, you want to take your sandpaper, wrap it around the crank journal. You want to wrap it kind of tight, you don't want it to be loose. And then take your shoestring and wrap it around. You wrap it around the crankshaft just like so. And then we're just going to work it back and forth just like this. Alright guys, so once you get it all sanded down with the 600 grit, you don't want to go too long. You kind of just want to do, I think it's like 20 rotations back and forth. It really doesn't take much to clean it up. And this is what we're looking like so far after the 600 grit. And I'm going to move on to 1,500 grit next. So yeah, but just a quick comparison to compare, some journals together. The top one there is already polished, and then this one is not polished. It's kind of hard to tell on camera, and this crank was already really clean. I'm just getting it kind of perfect before I throw it in the motor. So yeah, let's do 1,500 grit next and see how it looks. Alright guys, I got the crankshaft all polished up. It's looking pretty mint. But yeah, so I just did the 600 grit and then 1,500 grit. I could have taken a little bit more time, but I mean this thing looks pretty damn good already. And it was already a really clean crank, not really beat up at all, so it wasn't really needing that big of a polish. But it does look really good. So now I'm going to move on to some other things. I'm going to have to break out my pistons. So we will take these out, and we'll get to gapping the piston rings and whatnot for my B20. Behind me we have all the parts I'm going to be using in my B20 bottom end. These parts are all from P2P. I don't know if they have a website, guys. I know a lot of you guys have already been asking. Just type in P2P0 on eBay, and it should come up with their store. And they have an eBay store where you can buy these parts. But anyways, I'm going to be starting with taking the rings out of the packages, and we're going to be gapping the piston rings. And we'll start by doing that. So we're going to take the first piston ring, and we'll start by gapping these. Alright, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to be taking each piston ring, and I'm going to be matching it to a specific cylinder, and I'm going to be inserting the ring into the cylinder just like so. And I'm going to be measuring the ring end gap. So the gap in between the rings right here, you just stick a feeler gauge in here and set these all around 20 thousandths. That's where I like to set them. I like to go 20 thousandths on the top ring and 25 on the bottom. It's kind of big, but it's definitely better to be big than small because you do not want these piston ring ends to butt up against each other. If they butt up against each other, you can break your piston and, you know, just have failure. So I'm going to be just going bigger because I've noticed the bigger the ring gap, it doesn't make that much of a difference. Everybody says the bigger the ring gap you go, the more blow by you get, but I haven't noticed anything catastrophic to where this is going to be like a make or break kind of deal. So yeah, that's my recommendation. That's what I do personally. You guys may do it differently, and that's okay too. All the rings are gapped and ready to go. So we're going to install all the rings onto the pistons, and then we're going to connect the pistons onto the connecting rods here. But first we're going to put the piston rings on, starting with the oil ring. Usually I put one of the small ones on first, actually. So it's actually easier to put this one on first, just like so. And then you can flip the piston upside down and grab this guy and put it on the bottom side of that gold spring ring. Just like so. And then one goes on the top side of that spring ring. Hopefully you guys can see this. Just gonna work it around. Boom. And the oil control ring is installed. Next is the second ring, which you want to see here. There's an indentation that says N. It says N on the piston ring there, and I'm going to say that that means north. So I'm going to put the N facing the top of the piston. And you just want to walk it around. Boom. And our second piston ring is installed. Lastly is the top ring. This also has an indentation that says N on it, and we're going to put that to the top as well. Same thing, work it around, and boom, installed. Now, when you put these pistons into the motor now with the rings installed, you want to make sure that there's the opening here on the top ring and the second ring are 180 degrees apart from each other, because if both rings were positioned like this with the ring gaps open on both sides, you're going to lose compression through here. So you want to make sure that you spin them 180 degrees apart from each other so that doesn't happen. Now I'm going to install the rest of these piston rings, and then I'll pick up when I put the connecting rods onto the pistons. These pistons actually come with like a C-clip here. It's pretty simple. Just get like a needle nose pliers that has like a small, I actually grinded this one down a little bit, so it'll fit in the C-clip a little easier, and then you just squeeze them together and put them in, and the wrist pin goes right through, and this thing is looking mint. Okay, so I got the rods all connected onto the pistons here. You want to make sure when you put the connecting rod onto the piston that these bearing tangs on the connecting rod are towards the exhaust side of the motor. So on the piston here it says in for intake. The bigger valve reliefs are always on the intake side, and then where it says standard up there, that's the exhaust side. So just match the exhaust side to the bearing tangs here, and you should be all good to go. Next, I'm putting the piston into the motor, you know, just a regular standard ring compressor. this sucker down in here. There we are. Now you can see I got all the pistons installed into the motor. Now we can flip this thing around and get a crankshaft and some bearings installed. Alright, so I got all the bearings installed into the motor here. You can see the rod bearings installed and the main bearings on the block side. I got the rod bearings installed onto the caps as well on all of these. So now I'm going to be oiling all the bearing surfaces, and then I'm going to be installing my crankshaft. Okay guys, so I got everything torqued down. I kind of skipped ahead a few steps, but I got everything kind of buttoned up down here. So the main caps are all torqued down, and the rod bolts and everything are all torqued. This thing's ready to go. Spins pretty good. So I'm going to be putting the rear main seal on next, and the oil pump, and then once those are on, we can get the windage tray and then the oil pickup tube. I'm putting my rear main seal on now, and just got some RTV around the edges here, and then the rear main. I always put some grease on the inside of the rear main seal. I don't usually replace these because they're usually not bad. I usually just put grease on the seal. Unless it was leaking before, then I'll replace the seal, but this one was not leaking, so I just put some grease on there and some fresh gray RTV around the outside. I always use the ultra gray Permatex RTV because this stuff's actually meant for like imports, and it seems to work a lot better when you're putting Hondas together. So I'm gonna get this slapped on. Guys, same thing for the oil pump. You wanna grease the outside seal and then RTV around the corners. And we got the oil pump and the rear main installed. So next is the windage tray. This is just a plate that keeps oil from sloshing around. Just kind of bolts on. Pretty self-explanatory here. I got it all cleaned up. I got it all cleaned up pretty good, but you know, it's just stained from, you know, over time, all the old oil and stuff. But yeah, we'll get that bolted on. And then the pickup tube, which is right here, this little guy right here, is where the oil pump gets its oil from, and kind of just gets the oil. It goes through that screen and then goes through the motor. So that just gets bolted right here, just like so. And then it's the oil pan, and we're done here. Okay guys, final step of the bottom end is getting the oil pan on. And I got my old oil pan gasket here. This is a black OEM oil pan gasket. I usually like to use the OEM gaskets over like a Felpro because the OEM ones seem to not stretch as easily. Also, what I do to kind of help seal the oil pan, these oil pans are really tricky to seal, so I usually put a very thin film of RTV on the block, and then I put a very thin film of RTV on the oil pan as well. That kind of just helps any little, you know, areas where the pan gasket is not sealing perfectly. The RTV will kind of cover it and allow the pan to fully seal. Doing it this way, I never have any oil pan leaks, and I highly recommend that you guys do it as well. Like I said, just a little thin film of RTV around the block, and then a thin film on the oil pan, and you are dog pile chicken smile. Okay guys, she's all buttoned up. I got the motor all assembled, or I should say I got the bottom end assembled. She's looking pretty good. Give you a quick tour, front and back. While I was working on the motor here, I also cracked these plugs loose because on my last B20, these things were seized in here, and I actually had to weld a nut on the end of it to crack them loose, because these two fittings right here I'm going to use for an oil catch can. Probably going to hit up my homie Eric Orange. He actually makes really nice catch cans. If you guys haven't checked out his Instagram, be sure to follow Eric Orange Built on Instagram, and maybe pick up a catch can from him, because I'm going to be putting some catch cans on some customer cars hopefully, and my own car as well. So yeah, got this thing all dialed in. I had a Moroso 5.5 quart oil pan sitting in my attic for a while. Some guy actually gave it to me because he broke a rod on it, and it actually dented the pan in a few spots. So like, I don't even know if you can see it, but on the bottom, no, you can't really see it. Okay, yeah, it's right here. It got bulged a little bit because it busted a rod, but I I'm still gonna run it, you know, because I don't think it'll leak. I just got to get some plugs for like the front here. Actually, the front one I don't need to because I'm gonna be running a turbo drain right here. And then the back, I'm missing the drain plug and the fitting for the back here. This is probably for like an oil temp sensor or something. I'm gonna have to get some plugs for this stuff, and then gotta button up my cylinder head and do some other things. Probably get the cylinder head together tomorrow, maybe. I got a lot of stuff to do. I gotta finish Michael's motor, and then getting a Z6 for the customer build. That is gonna be done Saturday out of the junkyard for me. So just kind of waiting on that stuff. And yeah. So I'll probably pick up tomorrow, guys, and we will do maybe some cylinder head stuff again for my B20V. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this little video. Hopefully it was helpful for you guys. If it was, please smash that like button and hit the subscribe button if you guys are new. And if you guys are subscribed, please hit the bell. It notifies you anytime I upload a new video so you don't miss it, and you can be the first to comment. But yeah, so anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and we will see you tomorrow.